All right, let's dive into a philosophical revolution that tried to clean up philosophy once and for all by asking one very sharp question.
What do you do with a statement like this? Is it deep? Is it profound? Well, a group of thinkers in the early 20th century had a very different take. They wanted to get rid of questions like this forever. Not because they thought they were wrong, but because they believed they were literally meaningless. Just empty words.
And that brings us to their ambitious plan, to declare an all-out war on what they saw as philosophical nonsense.
Now, this idea didn't just pop up out of nowhere. It really snowballed over time. It all started back in the 19th century with a focus on scientific data. Then Bertrand Russell came along and supercharged it with his work on logic. After that, a group called the Vienna Circle made it official. And finally, a guy named A.J. Ayer brought it to the English-speaking world. You can really see how this was a century in the making.
And what was the end goal of all this? To completely wipe out metaphysics. We're talking about those huge, abstract theories about the ultimate nature of reality. Things like the absolute is perfect, or the soul is immortal. The positivists argued that statements like these weren't just false, they were literally gibberish.
So how are they going to pull this off? Well, they created a powerful gatekeeper for meaning. Think of it like a bouncer at the door of serious thought.
And that bouncer's one and only rule was this: the verifiability theory of meaning. Now, this is really important. It's not a rule about whether a statement is true or not. It's a rule about whether it has any meaning in the first place. The bottom line was, if you couldn't, even in theory, point to some real-world observation that would check your statement, then you were just making noise.
Okay, so let's get into how this actually worked. They basically said all language fits into two big buckets. Over here, you have non-cognitive language. This is stuff that just expresses feelings, like yelling ouch or asking a question. It's useful for sure, but it isn't stating a fact. Now, on the other side, you've got cognitive language, the stuff that does make claims. And they split this into two types: analytic statements, which are just true by definition, like all triangles have three sides, and synthetic statements, which are the factual claims about the world.
So here's the crucial part. For any of those factual, synthetic statements to mean anything, you had to know how you would go about verifying it. If you say, this key is made of iron, that's meaningful because we know how to check it. We can run tests, right? But if you say, justice is purple, how on earth would you even begin to verify that? According to the positivists, you can't. And so the statement is just meaningless noise.
Yeah, it sounds pretty clean in theory, doesn't it? A nice, logical world. But reality is messy. And it wasn't long before their perfect little rule started to show some major cracks, so they had to get a bit more flexible.
They had to do some quick repairs. The philosopher A.J. Ayer came in with a sort of upgrade kit. He pointed out that some things you verified directly, like seeing a house, but other things need indirect steps, like testing that key. He also made a distinction for things verifiable in principle, like a historical fact about Cleopatra, even if we can't do it in practice. And finally, and this was a big one, he swapped out strong verification for weak verification, so you didn't need absolute proof, just a high probability. This was totally essential to save things like scientific laws from being tossed out as meaningless.
But here's the thing about patches. Sometimes they just can't hold the whole thing together. And even with these clever fixes, the entire system, well, it started to crumble under the weight of some serious criticism.
The problem was, the attacks just kept coming, and they were hitting right at the foundation. For example, what about scientific laws like all water boils at 100 degrees Celsius? You can never fully verify that because you can't test all the water in the universe, past, present, and future. And that was just the start of their problems.
But the real knockout blow? It was this devastatingly simple question that turned their own weapon against them. Think about their main rule. A statement is only meaningful if it's true by definition or can be empirically verified. Now, how do you verify that statement? It's not true by definition, so it's not analytic, and you can't go out and observe it with your senses, so it's not synthetic. By its own rules, the verifiability principle declared itself to be meaningless.
And they had no good answer. This forced them into a huge retreat. They basically had to say, well, okay, it's not a fact about the world. It's more like a suggestion, a rule we choose to follow when we do science. But if it's just a choice, anyone who wants to talk about metaphysics can simply choose to ignore the rule. It lost all its teeth.
And just when you thought it couldn't get any worse for them, along comes the philosopher W.V.O. Quine, who delivered what many considered the final, devastating critique.
Quine pointed out two giant assumptions. He called them dogmas, that the whole thing was built on.
First, he attacked the idea that every single statement could be boiled down to a specific observation. But even more powerfully, he took a sledgehammer to that firm wall they built between analytic statements, truths of meaning, and synthetic statements, truths of fact. For the positivists, that distinction was everything. Quine argued that this clean divide is just a myth, that the line is blurry at best, and if you can't cleanly separate the two, their whole project just falls apart.
Instead, he suggested we should think of our knowledge not as a rigid chain, where each link has to be checked on its own, but more like a giant flexible web. In this web, all our beliefs support each other. Our experiences don't just test one belief at a time, they put pressure on the whole web, and we might make adjustments anywhere to make it all coherent.
And for the final bit of irony, one of the last nails in the coffin came from a guy who was, at the beginning, one of their biggest heroes, Ludwig Wittgenstein. His early work had really inspired them with this idea that language should be a perfect, logical picture of reality.
But then, years later, he did a complete 180. He looked back at his old ideas and essentially said, "Nope, I got it all wrong." He argued that language isn't one single thing. It's more like a toolbox, full of all sorts of different tools. You've got hammers for one job, screwdrivers for another. You use language to ask questions, tell jokes, give commands. The meaning isn't in verification, it's in how you use the tool.
So, okay, the main principle is shattered. The system is in ruins. What happens next? Where does philosophy go from here? Well, this collapse actually cleared the way for a whole new way of thinking.
Philosophy pretty much gave up the quest for a perfect scientific language. Instead, thinkers got really interested in what Wittgenstein called our language games. They started looking at how words like know or believe or good actually work in our messy, everyday conversations, instead of trying to cram them into a neat little box.
So you might think logical positivism was a total failure, but that's not the whole story. Even though the movement itself died out, its ghost is still kind of hanging around. It left behind a really healthy skepticism of grand, untestable claims and a permanent demand for clarity. It forced everyone to be a lot more careful about what they were really saying.
And that leaves us with a really fascinating and kind of tricky question. If Wittgenstein was right, and there is no single master rule for what's meaningful, if it's all just a bunch of different language games, then who gets to decide which games are worth playing? How do we decide which ways of talking about science, about art, about reality itself truly matter? And that's a question philosophers are still wrestling with today.